And this month, it's the second coming. We revisit the 1983-84 season at Stoke City, the return of the prodigal, Alan Hudson. His mission? Impossible. From being cut adrift at the bottom, Stoke went on an amazing run, amassing 33 points from 18 games. A banner reading "Welcome home, Huddy" greeted Alan on his debut against Arsenal. Hudson was back where 10 years ago he sprinkled magic dust, and like a vintage wine, the Guvnor had matured nicely to lighten up the mood and steer Stoke City out of the rapids of relegation to survival on the final day. Huddy, let's take up the story.
Oh, love. Did you write that or me?
No, I wrote that. I emailed it to you quite late last night.
Oh, did you?
Yeah,
I haven't seen it.
With the picture, and I've put it all on your socials as well, of you signing for Stoke City. It literally was the second coming. My first question to you would be, did you have any reservations about going back? Because you were such an icon 10 years ago, and it was 10 years later. You were in Chelsea reserves. Take up the story and let's have a look at that picture, famously when you're signing for Stoke City in what looked like a jumper that you'd been bought for Christmas.
Well, I'm not sure whether that picture was, maybe, I don't know. That was because I signed for a month. I only been signed on a month's loan, and the only reason they signed me was because they were so far adrift, and it wasn't the manager's decision to sign me. He never knew me. But I believe that Tony Waddington, although he wasn't manager, he was still very much involved on the sideline. Bill Asprey was a player when Tony was manager years ago with Matthews and all them in that side. And I think Tony went in to see. Well, I know Tony went in to see Bill Asprey. He says, "Look, you've got absolutely nothing to lose. At this moment in time, you're going to get relegated." I think Tony wanted me up there to because he missed me as on a social level. Never dreaming that I was going to get him out of trouble, because I was in, I just had the spell in Seattle. I'd had 3, 4, 5 months at Chelsea in the reserves, running out of petrol, really. If I was a car, I would have been, ready for the knackers yards, we might say. And then all of a sudden, that right out of the blue over Christmas, it was the best Christmas present or New Year's present I could have had. It was Tony. I don't know how he got my number, because I don't think it was the day of the mobile. I'm not sure. He must have found me at my home. I think I was staying at that time. I was staying with my mother, because I returned to Chelsea and on my own and left my wife and kids who stayed in Seattle. Yeah. So it was a bolt out of the blue. It was a blast, and then I couldn't possibly. It was fantastic, really. I couldn't possibly just knowing that Tony had gone in and fixed it all up. And I spoke to Tony. I didn't speak to the manager on the phone. I spoke to Tony. He said, "Well, look, we'll come up here, get you out of Chelsea reserves for a month and come and enjoy yourself for a month. I get a bit of first team football, and even if you just come up for a month, and who knows where it's going to lead, And it was a fantastic. It wasn't so fantastic at the time, because it was an impossible task. But just to see him for that month and get involved with Tony again, because I always said that, the only thing, I loved my time in Seattle. I had a miserable time at Arsenal playing wise, but I loved the club. But I had such a wonderful time in Seattle that the only thing that I missed was Tony himself. I wish he would have come to Seattle and enjoyed the football and the surroundings and the life of that, because the life in Stoke wasn't, it was not the most exciting place in the world. And so it was a fantastic phone call to get out the blue and go back there. And, the only problem I had, as I say, I met the manager just in a hotel right off the M6 there. the hotel we used quite a bit. Just one of those where the cars come off and have a cup of tea and something to eat, and I sat around with Bill Asprey, and I mean, I'd already made my mind up that I was going to take on the loan. It was costing them nothing really. The club had no money, but they were running out. They were running out quickly. They were staring relegation in the face basically, and Bill Asprey needed help. And it wasn't until a few weeks, months later that Brendan O'Callaghan told me. He said I was coming out of a game one day when we got another beating at home, and I spoke to Tony in the bar, and he said, "What a lovely." He said, "You're right." He said, "What a lovely man he is," and he said, "I've got some good news for you." He said, "What's that?" He said, "Well," he said, "I've heard that Hudson's at Chelsea, and he's prepared to come up here and have a go. He's back from Seattle, and that's what started the ball rolling. And next thing you know, I'm sitting in that hotel off the M6, and that was on the Monday. I had a couple of training sessions, and straight into the game against, of all teams, Arsenal, who I'd left to go to Seattle. So my last game in England was against Arsenal, and my first game back was against Arsenal. So it was, and Don Howe, who I left at Arsenal as my coach, was then the manager. So a lot of things had changed. I had Charlie Nicholas and Tony Woodcock and David O'Leary was playing. I think Kenny Sampson might play. They had a full team out, so there was no excuses on their side, And Stoke got their first win. I mean, it was a big day for them.
How did it feel for you walking out and seeing that banner, "Welcome home, Huddy"? And did you find it easier playing against Arsenal with what had happened before than any other team to make your debut against?
Well, to tell the truth, I didn't know. I'd be lying if I said I was confident or anything like that.
Yeah.
Much like the first time around when I was in terrible form at Chelsea and I went there, and you wouldn't have staked your life on playing well, but I did. I had a great game against Liverpool first game, but this time I was 8 years older, and my legs were going, and I just really had to. What I found is when I first walked into the dressing room was there was like a dark cloud over the place, and my first thought was, you got to lift this cloud, because the dressing room was like walking into a funeral parlour. They couldn't get a point. They hadn't won 2 games in a row all season. They were having a total nightmare, and as we spoke the other day, they had 6 or 7 internationals in the team, and you wondered. It just goes to show the word when you hear people say confidence is everything. Well, this was a place with absolutely no confidence whatsoever. They were just players who were walking around just going in expecting to get beat. But I was on a mission, and I wanted to. I never even dreamt that we could stay up. I don't think anybody did really. But I just wanted to get my contract extended so I didn't have to go back in the reserves at Chelsea. And I had such a great rapport with the crowd there. That was kind of what got me through it. Seeing that banner, and they were right behind me from the first whistle, where on the first occasion they didn't know me at all. So they kind of expected me to do it without knowing that, especially with my lifestyle, it was a miracle really, because I was, that was a time I was out and about in London, and just kind of living the last days of my playing days, enjoying myself off the field really, because I was staying with my mother. I didn't have no wife and children to go home to. I was just out enjoying myself. You wouldn't believe I was a footballer, the way I was living my life, and then to go, and then I realised I had to go up there, and I had to really crack the whip up there for a month, and which I did.
Well, the songs that we're going to be playing aren't necessarily all from 1984, like previous podcasts, but they're
Yeah.
songs that evoke memories about that 83-84 season. You almost set Stoke City free and got them out of jail, which leads us nicely onto your first track, which is Unchained Melody, that was written by North and Zarette for a prison film in 1954. Now, that song almost was never recorded because North composed the music and wanted Zarette to write the lyrics, but he's too busy painting his house. He says, I ain't got time. However,
Yeah.
he did find the time. They did compose and write the song, and Unchained Melody is one of the greatest songs that we've ever heard. It's quite
Well,
incredible, if
yeah,
only,
yeah.
isn't it, again?
It just goes to show, it's that's why they used it in Ghost, and it was like it was hauntingly fantastic, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Really, it was. I think it had a little bit of not the sound of it, but it was a little bit in a scary way, it was a little bit very Leonard Cohen,
yes.
dark, and but I mean the song itself was absolutely incredible. Uh, and I'll always remember it for that. And then when you watch the film Ghost, it was just so apt for that film, Yeah, it was an unbelievable song, and you tell the story about the chap, and yeah, I can relate to some getting something fantastic out of it through being like that. Yeah.
And you could almost, Waddington could have penned that kind of, missing Alan Hudson, being away, inviting him back into the fold, and then the rest, as they say, is history. And we are going to tell that story of historically and possibly, arguably, the greatest escape ever, from literally the pits and the basement of the English First Division.
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about 13, 14 points adrift,
Yeah,
those were the days of 2 points, which makes it even more incredible. So we were like 7 games behind the second from bottom team. So we had to get 7 wins without the 2 above us getting any over a period of time, and that was in January. The season, kind of. Then we always said at that time that you don't. Things sort themselves out around Easter when you know who's going to kind of half win the league, but almost definitely the relegation spots are sorted out at Easter. And I think Easter was a time that gave us a belief, because I think we might have drawn it. We went to Nottingham Forest. I think I'm almost sure that Cloughie was there, and we got a 0-0 draw. But I remember
yeah, you did.
we played Liverpool on the Easter Monday again, and I had this thing about Easter Mondays. I mean, Easter Mondays for me are so memorable because on the Easter Monday in 1970, I went over on my ankle at West Brom and missed the cup final, missed the World Cup. On the Easter Monday on 1975, I played the best game of my life against Liverpool when Shankly came in the dressing room. And on the Easter Monday of this year, it was do or die against Liverpool again with Graham Souness. And had we lost that game, there was no way we could get out of trouble. That was it. But we beat Liverpool 2-0, which gave up. It was kind of in the dressing room after. Well, if we can beat them, we can get out of trouble. Basically, that was what that was. That Easter Monday in '84 was the biggest result of any season, I think, especially with them facing relegation. And then, the dark cloud had gone by then. The lads, we built a team spirit, which it's easy to do it when you're winning.
Yep.
Anyone can go into Manchester United and under Ferguson and have this fantastic team spirit because everything's rosy in the garden. But this was a total nightmare, and we had to lift it. And we had a little club. I found this club they introduced me to, the Richmond Leisure Centre, and I used to go there and train, and they had a bar in there. They were straight after training, we'd go in the bar, and I didn't, invite the lads up, and that's where we built our team spirit up, and not only with the players, but with the community. It was just an incredible time where, people weren't saying that you think you're going to get out of trouble. They still thought we were going to get relegated right to the last 2 games, as we went into the last game, that, it was going to be down to goal difference.
And you stayed up on 50 points. Birmingham City, my team, got relegated on 48, and Coventry were on 50 as well. And you're right, that goal difference was just above Coventry. I think it was 2 up, 2 down, wasn't it, in those days? I've got an
Yeah,
idea, Al. It was, I'd worked it out. I think it was just at the time where it became 3 points for a win. Because I'd worked it out. You'd played 18 games, you'd won 10, and you drew 5. Liverpool was your 8th win. It was remarkable how you turned it round. You turned it round by that camaraderie. You turned it
yeah.
round by the fact that you were the governor. They were almost waiting for somebody to light that fuse, because you had a number of decent players. I think you'd worked it out. You had 7 international players in that Stoke City team, and you look at that and you just think, how can it go so horribly wrong? But you put it absolutely right. What was the first training session like for you with them boys? What was the confidence? We know what the confidence was like in the dressing room, but what were they like in training? Because you had Sammy McElroy there. You had some good footballers at Stoke.
Well, there was only one training session I can remember that week. Is that was on the Friday of the first match against Arsenal, and I remember being in the gymnasium and thinking to myself, "This is more important than the Saturday,
Yeah,
because we got to start passing the ball around." And I have a, as usual, especially in them days, you got your old black bin bag on and all that, and you want to get a good sweat. So you put really, some of your toughest games are in there on a Friday morning, because it's a great workout, and it gives you, and it's good for you. If you play well on a Friday morning, your confidence then your confidence come back. And I come out the. I remember coming out of the shower and sitting down, and Sammy, we were tailing ourselves off, sitting next to each other. He had a locker next to mine, and he said he used to call me Hud, and he just said, Hud, he said, thank God you've come, he said, because he said, I haven't enjoyed a training session. I enjoyed playing football as much as that for so long. He said we had a fabulous time last season with Mickey Thomas here and all that. He said, but that is the best I've brought a bit of sanity back into the club, really. And I said, well, Sam, that's exactly how we're going to play tomorrow. I said, I'm going to get off the goalkeeper. You don't come in our half. You just pick it up in them little spaces over in their half, because Sammy is the kind of player that used to get it and run at people,
yeah.
and my job was to get it off the goalie and play a couple of passes into the fullbacks and make sure you get it back, and then play it into his feet. It was much like the way I played with Greenoff in the first time around, but only Sammy was a totally different player. Jimmy would knock it in and you get it back off Jimmy, but Sammy would go it alone, and he was a very talented player. They said he was going. Before that, when he started Manchester United, they hailed him as the new George Best. He was never going to be that, but that was when he first came in. He was that good a player, very, very talented.
He made his debut, I think, at 17 at Manchester United. You're absolutely right. I mean, he was a top player, in his day. His better days, you could argue, were behind him by the time he got to Stoke. 10 years ago, when you went into that dressing room, there was the boys wasn't particularly enamoured by your signing. When you met them in the Place nightclub, they said, well, it ain't strange. We thought we might meet you in a place like that because that's what you're like. But this time around, it was a case of like cold shoulder first time, but hello this time, wasn't it? Which, again, incidentally and coincidentally, it leads us into the second track, Hello by Lionel Richie, which is one of the greatest songs ever written.
Yeah, especially at that time, it was. Again, it's another one. It's quite apt, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's again very mysterious again, and it's as you said, to go to sign for a football club, and you sign for them twice, and they're in the bottom four both times you
yeah,
sign. Is quite incredible, really. And although I never looked at it the first time around, I definitely knew it the second time around. But it didn't matter to me, because I wasn't going there you know, like the first time around, you never knew within a year. They were fourth from bottom. Within a year, we were top of the first division and looked like winning the league. And we were the best team in the league. We created such a tremendous, I wouldn't say camaraderie, but with Waddington, he got it all right. And all the pieces fell into place, which he did by buying Jeff Salmons, who was perfect for us on the left. And he sees me as a perfect ally for Jimmy Greenoff to get the best out of Jimmy, and I think that's what happened. But the second time around was just nobody knew. It was every day we went in, and you know, can you imagine winning 3 games and you're still 10 points behind, and you know, and everyone's going, oh well, you know, it was laughable really. But it got serious. The time when it got really serious when we beat Liverpool. That Easter, and it gave everybody, you know, everybody in the city. It wasn't all to do with the team and the football club. It was everybody in the city. I mean, it's such a small town, Stoke-on-Trent. I always call it the fishbowl, and you know, you can't sneeze there without going back to the manager. It's an incredible place, and they do love their football. They're very, very knowledgeable about it in those days. But they've obviously been starved of it for a long time. But in those days, you know, I mean, they'd had some fabulous players there before I got there. You know, with your Eastams and your Dobins and your Dennis Violet and people like that, Roy Vernon and all these players that played in Manchester United. And that's where Tony got his. Because Tony was being an old Busby babe. He got on very well with. Sir Matt, and that was his kind of hunting ground. But he would take all the older players on, and they're the ones that got Stoke out of the trouble before I got there in '74. And obviously then he made the best signing maybe of all time in Gordon Banks, buying the best goalkeeper in the world at that time for 30-odd thousand was just unthinkable.
Great line in the song Hello. Is it me you're looking for? And it was you that they was looking for. It was you that they needed. It didn't last that long.
I think they needed more than me. They needed Jesus Christ really at that time. I mean, you know. It was pretty much like the great story. I think we done it first time around when they won the year before they won the League Cup. They played in the Anglo-Italian, and for people that haven't heard the one before, they played in Stoke played in Rome against Roma, and there was murders on the pitch. But before when they actually got there, the fellow looks after them. He said, Mr. Waddington, if there's anything you need while you're here, just let me know and enjoy your stay in Rome. That's what they're like, you know. And he says, well, there is, and half jokingly, he said, I'd like an audience with the Pope. And he said, well, I'll see what I can do. And then the next thing you know, he woke up one morning, him and the chairman were in the same room, and they'd both been on the lash the night before, and he said, we got to get up and go and see Pope Paul. So they go up there, and the Pope says to him, and Tony told me this, he said to me, there was trouble at the game last night. He said he knew all about his football. He said it was incredible. He says, do you realise, Mr. Waddington, he said that you've got to be you're responsible for your team's behaviour. And now, right at that time, everybody that went to Rome was in a fight. Yeah. You know, the Roma were diabolical at that time. I still believe that they can be there. Yeah. And Tony went, I'll keep that in mind. Well, the following year, they won the only trophy they've ever won in the history of their life in the club. And the following season, Gordon had the problem with the car crash, and they were down the bottom again, and they couldn't work anything out. And he was in the office with the chairman again, Albert Henshaw, and they couldn't come up any because they had, I don't know if they had any money. I couldn't have had any money or whatever. And he said Tony said, there's only one way to work this out. He said, we're not going to do it in the office. We better go in the boardroom and open a couple of bottles. He got the bottle of gin out, And Albert had a gin and tonic. He had a gin and tonic. After 2 or 3, Albert said, he said, I think I found the answer. And Tony says, no, you haven't found the answer. You can't go over and see Pope Paul every time you need a result, you know. And that was what Albert was insinuating. And so they were in dire trouble, you know. But that was the kind of people they were there. They, you know, he must have been as fun. People didn't know what it, and he was a serious football man, but he had a wicked sense of humour, and the chairman was a comedian. You know, Albert Henshaw, everybody used to mimic him and things like that, you know. So that was the kind of club Stoke was. But I was now going into a different club with a different chairman, with a different manager, and but the manager was right beside me, you know, before and after the matches.
There was something in the air tonight, wasn't there? And there always was when you played for Stoke. And it literally was, as we've alluded to earlier, Against All Odds, which was one of the top films of 1984. And Phil Collins is a tremendous artist. One of your pals used to run Phil around. So let's indulge a little bit with Phil. And why did you pick In the Air Tonight? What memories does that song evoke for you at Stoke City?
Well, I've met Phil a couple of times, yeah. And I'd like to. In fact, I tried to contact my friend the other day to get hold of him because he's not very well at the moment. Hoping, reaching out, trying to find him really, to wish him well and see him. But at that time, I see him on stage 2 or 3 times, and then I see him with Genesis. And I've seen him do that, and I've seen him do. He was more than a musician. Yeah. Phil Collins. He told a story, didn't he?
Yeah.
You know, and that was a kind of story. And you know, one of the greatest things I've ever seen him do was Mama. You know, he was crying out to his mum, and you know, the man was. You know, he'd been in the movies since a kid. He done the film Buster, didn't he? Later on. So he was a man, and every song it's like the kind of like playing football against a great footballer. It can be pretty mesmerising, and it can you know, the word spellbound comes to mind. But that was Phil, you know, that's what he did, and that was his music, and it was everything was kind of mysterious with him, and that was what was happening at Stoke at the time. It was one big mystery. It was nobody knew what the outcome would be. You know, everybody else in the league knew their future, because they all knew it was going to come down to the end, and they're going to either be, you know, if they win 2 out of the last 3 games, they're going to be safe. But we knew if we'd have won every game, we knew we was going to go into the last game of the season, and we needed to win that match, and it was just it was there for all. You know, we were going to win the last game, come what may. It didn't matter, because you ain't going to get out of all that trouble and then throw it away in the last. But we did get the help with. He swears he didn't do it on purpose, but my friend, one of the best players, you know, I've seen, Alan Hudson at Stoke, he was playing for Wolves on the last game of the season, and he gave 2 penalties away, and I thanked him for it afterwards, and he said, no, he said, I wouldn't do that. I said, no, I know you wouldn't, Alan, you know. I said, you're Stoke City at heart, and thank you for the penalties, kind of thing. And Paul Maguire put them both away and scored all 4 goals. So, you know, it was miraculous, really.
And other films out that year, Al: Footloose, Once Upon a Time in America, Purple Rain, Karate Kid, Gremlins, and Beverly Hills Cops. It was a great year for films, and it was a great year for music. And we have talked about some of the players that played at Stoke, or ones that had gone on. Mickey went the one way and you come the other way. You almost passed each other on the motorway. But some of your other teammates in that side, let's just indulge on them a little bit.
Before I do, I think that it would have been made my job a lot easier if Mickey would have stayed.
Yes.
Because he went to Chelsea, and he was fantastic for Chelsea. He was kind of the one that nudged them over the line in the end when they got promotion. I left the promotion winning team to go down to a relegation one, but I was never in the first team there. But yeah, I'd love Mickey to have been in that side, because I would have had so many more stories. That was before he, got into doing his own, making his own money, and I had to go and visit him. First time I met Mickey, I went up to visit him in prison, so that was another story. But and I needed to go and see him to see if he needed anything, and he said to me, he says, we've never met, thanks for coming. He said, if you can get me a weekend pass, it would. He said, I've met this girl, and I'm dying to see her again. And I had a word with the screws there, because the people I knew, they knew this screw, and I said, look, how about if we put a football match on at the prison for you, if Mickey can get a weekend pass? And that's how it come about. So I was behind that. But then, with him going down to London, it was with my cousin as well, bless him, Anthony Mason. Anthony was around him at the time when he was making these notes. He was the instigator, and they even brought the notes out with Mickey's face on, didn't they? So it's a great story. But it was sad that he left. I'd love to have played with Mickey, because I rated him as a player, and I knew the people in Stoke that he knocked around with. He was very popular boy. But you look at, first of all, the first one that looked me up and down was Brendan O'Callaghan. He's like 6'4", 6'5", and he kind of looked at me like he was a prison warden, as much as when I'd walked into the prison, He kind of looked at me up and down, as much as say, well, I don't see you as our saviour, But yeah, I did get some strange looks when I went back a second time. But as I say, they were a bunch of lads that were just so low, so low on confidence. It reminds me a little bit of today, really, going out and everybody's scared, about this virus. It was a scary situation, and Stoke had never been in that position,
And other players, who else was in that midfield? Or George Berry must have been playing in the back four, and he was an international player as well, wasn't he, George? Yeah,
George played alongside Brendan. George was probably the most popular player in the team. They loved Georgie Berry at Stoke.
Yeah.
And then we had a very good player at left back, was Peter Hampton. He was a top footballer. Very underrated. Another one of Revy let go from Leeds. Right back was Steve Bowl, but he shouldn't have been a right back. He was 6'2", 6'3", and I said to the manager, "You got to move him centre half," which he did eventually before he left for Arsenal. We had Robbie James, who played for Wales. He was a regular in the Wales team. He was on my right side. And on the right wing was the local lad Mark Chamberlain, whose kid plays for us, plays for Liverpool now. And there's absolutely no resemblance to them as players. Mark was, they say, the old saying, so he could catch pigeons. He was that quick, and on his day he could look a world beater.
Yeah.
So and then of course there was Sammy, and with myself going into the team, I'd played for England, so we've had kind of 7-8 players, and then we had like a little fella, Ian Painter, who lives down your neck of the woods. He's a Wolverhampton boy. He was a good player, but he had a terrible time with injuries. So we kind of had if it was like the first time around again, that all the questions were asked. If only I'd have started the season off there, I wonder where we would have been. Like the first time around, we finished 4th or 5th, and not far behind the leaders. And everybody was saying, well, I wonder what would have happened if you started in August. That was a championship winning team,
But the manager changed the philosophy of football. They went pretty much route one, didn't they? From playing football, there was a trip to Lilleshall, and it ultimately ended up playing route one.
Yeah. Well, that was the game plan at that time, and I'll never forget. While I was in Seattle, I see that Charles Hughes game one night in Vancouver. They played a match, and I was upstairs in in the lounge, and we were watching the game from the lounge, and he was in there. Someone pointed him out to me, and it made me feel a bit ill. Actually, I couldn't even speak to him, but he introduced that to the FA Route 1 football, and it kind of destroyed our football for quite a few years. It set us back a long time, and it's only the getting rid of him that's brought back a bit of sanity back into football. And not only that we started introducing foreign players who wouldn't get involved in that kind of football.
It was almost like a crime against football, wasn't it? Which leads us to our next track from the Police. A big fan of the Police, you are, Huddy, and Every Breath You Take, which
not the actual Police. No, I'm not a big fan of the Police. I love the Police. First time I see them, and everything is magic or whatever it was. It was. Nobody knew at that time, like us getting out of trouble. Nobody knew what Sting was going to turn out to be. I mean, what a talent. But that was great. I mean, I was a big fan of the group, the Police. If I can correct you on that one, Paul. I have been in prison cells myself.
And a few of your associates, like Mad Frankie Fraser and Tony as well. Tommy Wisby. Again, associates that you were. And before you went to Stoke, you were knocking around with young Frankie, and you got him a game of football as well. You arranged a number of games of football, didn't you, that, probably the Police wouldn't have liked. Mind you, Sting might have got involved. I think he was half decent.
Yeah, I think there's everybody would like to have played in these games. It was, I remember Frank, because it was actually his bar was in Denmark Street.
Yeah.
Denmark Street is known for the music centre of the world. It's where all the record producers were, and he used to run the club called the Tin Pan Alley, where all the villains used to go to, and that used to be my afternoon spot. And I teamed up with young Frank in there, and I said to him one day, look, the Royal Tournament was on at Earls Court, and my uncle and my cousin was quite well in there and had their own little thing going there. They even got a yacht out there one day without anyone knowing. But that was another story. I said to Frankie, we're playing against the Fleet Air Arm tomorrow upstairs, right on the top, on the roof of Earls Court, and I introduced him, and I told my family, I said, Frankie Fraser's coming to play tomorrow. They said, yeah. So they started laughing. Anyway, right at the last minute, he weren't there. We're just going to kick off, and this Mercedes comes round the bend there. It's like a scene off of the Sweeney, and he swung his Mercedes round, parked it on the side, and jumped out in his kit. And he said, let's go. And he scored a hat-trick or something, and he was screaming, I told you I was better than you, because he was Arsenal mad, Frankie. Yeah. So they were great days, I mean, if I suppose everything good comes out of something bad with me. I was having a night, but it's the show last week with Peter Rose Browne. We were talking about what fun we had at Chelsea in the reserves, but it was no fun playing the matches. We just had fun in training and before training, and we're doing our little warm-ups and all that. It was all great fun, but it's no good if you're not playing on a Saturday.
Absolutely. Mind you, if your dad's Mad Frankie Fraser and he's standing on the touchline, you've got half a chance of being decent, ain't you?
Well, I don't think a referee would argue with an old man. I mean, Mad Frankie was, I've met Frankie a couple of times, and he tried to, he was crazy. I mean, he tried to dig me out a couple of times. I can't say too much about him because he's not with us now.
Yes.
And obviously me being fantastic friends, I had a fantastic, lovely friend in Tommy Woodsby, the great train robber. Frankie married his daughter, so that was the kind of link there. And when I was visiting Tommy in hospital, Marilyn was always there. So and Frankie was gone by that time.
Mm.
So it was a good link up. But when you think it was a link up, you're knocking about. I mean, I'm not one of those who hang around. I I wouldn't call, because Tommy weren't a villain, but you know, Frankie was close to them, and the Craze wouldn't go near Frankie. He was a total crackpot, you know. They all steered away from Frankie, and he was only about 5'6", 5'7", you know. Yeah, crazy.
Did you
But
ever? Sorry, I'll carry
he's
on.
no, he's just a madman, you know. Size don't come into it when you're mad, you know. You know, they say about size and footballers,
Yeah.
you know, don't bring size into anything. You don't judge a book by its cover, mate. Not with these people, you know. And you know, they reckon in prison, you know, even when he was, you know, coming out his cell, it needed 3 or 4, you know, of the screws. Not one screw would go in there with him alone. You know, he was a very dangerous man.
Did you ever have any contact with the Craze?
No, I never did. I never went that side of London. It wasn't until I moved into their neck of the woods when I got married over there, and I lived over there for a while. But I liked that part of the world. It was a great part of the world, and obviously I was in the hospital. That was the hospital they took me to, opposite where the Craze used to. That was their holdout. They're called the Grey Morris. They used to drink in there, but the famous pub was obviously the Blind Beggar, where they had the shooting that night when I think it was Jack the Hat McVitie or someone, wasn't it? I'm pretty much clued up on what went on. And Bobby Moore took that pub over years late when I was at Arsenal. Yeah, he ran that pub with his partner he had a partner in the pub game. He had a few pubs, Bobby, and they took over the Blind Beggar, and I went to the opening night of the Blind Beggar with a couple of mates of mine, and we walked in, and I do laugh about it because they were doing some final decorations because it was their opening night, and I'm sure they were still filling in the bullet holes, you know. It was crazy, and I think it was a night we kind of took over the pub. Me and Johnny Conti was around at the time, and me and him took over. So we made a right party of it. They were great times. I mean, you couldn't go out in the East End and not have a great time.
You also had a great time in Tampa. I'm Still Standing is a song that reminds you of those days at the end of the season. So you take up the story. You've just beaten Wolverhampton Wanderers 4-0. You've stayed up. What happened next?
Well, like any other club you've been at. I mean, and I was very fortunate even in Seattle. I mean, we went on a pre-season tour in Seattle. We went to Santa Anita. I mean, it was in right down on the beachfront, and it was incredible. Santa Monica. You know, we always at the end of every season you'd have a tour. That's wherever you went, and we got out of trouble on the Monday morning. I went in and knocked on the manager's door, and I said, "Where are we going on tour?" And he said, "We're not going anywhere." He said, "We've had no money." I said, "Well, you can't do this to the players." I said, "Do you realise what we've just done?" I said, "You know, you'd have been in the second division if we hadn't have done this." I said, and everybody's put their shift in. Everybody's been brilliant. You know, the whole, you know, from the team spirit that we built, and he said, "No, I'm afraid we're not going anywhere." So I put in a call to my friend who I knew in Tampa Bay, because I had a small home over there, a small townhouse over, which I bought while I was in Seattle. And my friend, I said, "Look, see if you can fix up a game against the Rowdies," and Tampa Bay Rowdies. And Rodney Marsh, I think, was maybe just a little bit involved with them still. And you know, all we need is them to pay our airfare and our flights, and we'll give you a game. And they agreed to it. And I went back into to Bill Asprey again and told him, and he become our manager again. So I said, I haven't picked you to become our manager, but we had to have him coming because we were going to Stoke City. So my best mate Tony Davies at the time, who never missed a game, and he was my mate and stayed with me in Seattle, this, that, and the other. And I said, well, part of the deal was that Tony comes as our physio, so we had Tony as a physio. So it was a party from the moment the plane doors closed in London to when they closed when we left. I left them at the airport on the way back, because I stayed over there. But as I put in my thing, we stayed in a hotel called the Hall of Fame, and the lads got it changed to the Hall of Shame. Such were the shenanigans that went on there. It was unbelievable. I don't think they were ready. Tampa Bay wasn't ready for the boys from the Potteries. The young lads especially.
So you could argue that they were called Tampa Bay, and you put the Rowdies in it.
Well, it wasn't this. It wasn't the older ones. It was the younger ones, the Chris Mascaries and the Ian Painters, and we had 3 or 4 kids, and who were a great part of our squad, and they just couldn't believe it. They was in heaven over there, and I took them to all the best places in Clearwater, to the best restaurants and bars and all this, and they were just in heaven. It is a great part of the world. To think that after the game on Saturday, on Sunday we weren't going anywhere, and then we are 2 weeks later we're in Tampa Bay. So it was all ended well,
And what goes on tour stays on tour. Did any of them want to stay with you for the extra 3 weeks, Alan? Were they forced to go back?
Well, no, we only had the week because of the one game, but I'm sure had it been a month, nobody would have argued. Yeah, no. I mean, me and my friend who stayed over there, we went to the airport to see him off, and it was, there was tears and everything. It was unbelievable. No, they had a one, and they deserved it. I mean, what they didn't do. I mean, people will say, well, you was a saviour. I was a saviour in the dressing room. As I say, I went in, I had to lift a dark cloud, but on the field, all over the field, the goalkeeper, Peter Fox, was incredible form all season. I would say he saved them more than anybody on the field. Sammy done his part up front, and Brendan done his part at the back, and he would come up and score. He's got vital goals, and he could play centre forward and centre half. George Berry was loved there, so it all kind of come together. It kind of brought them all together, and we used to go out before we went to Tampa. We would just go around Stoke raising money for the tour, for the spending money, because the club had no money. But it was just an excuse to go out and have a good time. But it was a special. That's why I chose 1984, because I don't think we could do a series without talking about it. And I'm sure if you used to go around Stoke-on-Trent and ask people about that period, it was a memorable time.
It certainly was. It will live in the memory banks forever in the Potteries. The return of
Tampa.
The return of the prodigal. You mentioned partnerships, you and Tony, and you had many partnerships while you were playing football. But a partnership for our last record, Tears for Fears, Everybody Wants to Rule the World, and Huddy, you did. What's your memories of the boys, Tears for Fears, and the song? Because it has been covered a couple of times. It's a brilliant track.
Well, I think the old album they brought out, Tears for Fears, Everybody Wants to Rule the World, and they just reminded me. I mean, it could have been the Beatles.
Yeah.
They were just 2 very, very, very talented lads, or one. Obviously, one of them is like the Lennon and McCartney thing. 2 geniuses, but the one man was Lennon, obviously. But Tears for Fears and music, I just thought they was going to go on to be bigger than anyone. I really did. I think their music was fantastic, but I believe they had a bit of a falling out, and that was that, which can happen. But I suppose it's like a marriage. You don't usually get a duo do that. It's different. You got like the Bee Gees where there was 4 of them, and that's probably why Elton was so successful. He was on his own, but he had Bernie Taupin, who used to do it from miles away. They didn't live in each other's pocket. But there was obviously problems between these 2 boys. But what a shame, because the music they would have been making was phenomenal. And I just loved Tears for Fears, and I was really, really disappointed that their music was stood up them to any time when of pop music, really.
I suppose they say nothing lasts forever, and Huddy, we are at the end of this wonderful trip down memory lane. So all I can say is thanks for the memories, Al. I'm sure every Stoke City fan that's listening to this would say to you, Huddy, thank you so much for saving us. Sadly, the season after, they wasn't saved. Stoke City did go down, and unfortunately, the chairman died before you'd signed on the dotted line to become the manager. Who knows what would have happened? Because instead of you, they had Mick Mills.
Well, yeah, it was that was the saddest moment of my life. I would think, well, apart from losing family, but in my football life, that was, I can remember jumping off the train in 1974, my first day as a player there, as a record signing, and as a player, and then there I am, 10 years later, getting off the train as apart from signing the contract, the new manager of Stoke City, and I left all my family at home. So excited that it would have been a new venture, a new journey in my life. I look at Frank Lampard now at Chelsea and think, you don't know how lucky you are. You just walked into the job, one of the top jobs in the world. And there's me. I've gone all the way to Stoke, 150 miles. I spoke to the chairman on the Friday night, who all but, if he'd have had the contract in his pocket, I would have signed on the Friday night. But with my luck, I got there. They said he died in the early hours, so he died about 5 hours before I got off the train, and I weren't to know. And I remember going to the old phone on the wall there at the Stoke station. I still look at it when I go now, but it's not there, but where it was, and I still look at it and think, if only. Because you don't, as you just said, you don't know where it led to, because I'm sure because if there's any team in the world I wanted to manage, it was Stoke City, no doubt.
Well, they were the days, my friend, and they won't end because we will keep reliving them in My Life, My Music. So think of another year and 6 more tracks, Huddy. Till next time, love you, mate. See you later. Cheers, pal.